I'm 101 years old. Every morning I wake up before the sun, make my oatmeal the same way I have for decades, and sit by the window while the kettle cools. I can tell you exactly what I ate for breakfast last Tuesday. I can tell you the year I retired, the name of my first principal, and the sound my father's boots made on the kitchen floor when he came home from work. That's why the doctor's words caught me off guard. He didn't say them cruelly. He said them calmly, the way someone does when they believe the conclusion is already settled. At your age, he said, looking down at my chart, memory decline is inevitable. I nodded. Not because I agreed, but because I was listening. I didn't argue. I didn't ask for another test. I didn't demand a second opinion. I had lived long enough to know that arguing with statistics rarely changes anything. But as I walked out of that office, past the rows of gray chairs and old magazines no one ever reads, one thought stayed with me. If losing your mind is inevitable, why do some people never seem to lose it at all? I didn't say that to the doctor. I went home and made a different choice. The exam room was quiet in that particular way only medical offices ever are, not peaceful, just muted. Like life itself had been turned down a few notches. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, too loudly. I noticed that because my hearing isn't what it used to be, yet that sound cut through everything. Tick, tick, tick. Time, reminding me it was still moving, whether I wanted it to or not. The doctor flipped through my chart, page after page, blood pressure, cholesterol, age circled in red ink like it explained everything that mattered. He wasn't unkind. In fact, he was careful. He spoke slowly, choosing words meant to soften the weight of what he was saying. Cognitive decline happens to most people eventually, he explained, especially past a certain age. A certain age, as if there were a line in the sand you crossed and your mind simply started packing its bags. I sat there, hands folded in my lap, listening. Truly listening, not just to his voice, but to what he wasn't saying. He was talking about probability, about averages, about charts and trends and what usually happens. But I wasn't a chart. I had taught long enough to know that averages hide the exceptions, and exceptions are where the truth often lives. So I thanked him. I smiled, I took my coat, and as I stood up, I realized something quietly important. He was describing what happens when people stop expecting anything from their minds. I wasn't ready to do that. When you live long enough, you don't need statistics. You have faces. I could picture them clearly as I drove home that day. People I had known for decades. People who had once been sharp, loud, stubborn, and full of opinions. My friend Eleanor retired at 62. She said she was finally going to rest. At first, it sounded harmless. She watched her shows in the afternoon, then in the evening, then all day. The phone rang less. Her calendar emptied out. Within a few years, conversations with her became short, then confused, then impossible. My cousin Harold was a numbers man, quick with math, faster with jokes. After retirement, he stopped doing anything that required effort. I've earned my peace, he used to say. 10 years later, he couldn't remember my name. Then there was Ruth. She terrified everyone with her memory. Birthdays, addresses, grudges from 1954, she remembered it all. Until one day, she didn't. Her daughter told me Ruth would sit by the window for hours, staring, waiting for something she couldn't name. They didn't lose their minds suddenly. They drifted away from them. And yet, there were others. A woman from my church who volunteered until 95, a former colleague who argued politics at the diner every morning. They aged, yes, their bodies slowed, but their eyes stayed awake. That was when the pattern became impossible to ignore. It wasn't age that separated them. It was what they did after the world told them they were done. And sitting in my kitchen that afternoon, coat still on, keys in my hand, I understood something with absolute clarity. I could follow the path I had already seen end badly, or I could choose differently, on purpose. I didn't make a dramatic vow. There was no moment where I slammed my hand on the table and declared I would outsmart time. That's not how real decisions are made. I sat at my kitchen table, coat still on, purse on the chair beside me, and asked myself one simple question. What would someone do if they truly believed their mind was worth protecting? Not what a doctor would prescribe, not what a magazine headline promised, not what people my age were expected to accept. What would I do, starting tomorrow morning? I knew one thing immediately. I wasn't going to wait for symptoms. I wasn't going to treat forgetfulness like a weather report I had no control over. And I wasn't going to chase miracle pills or internet cures that sounded too good to be true. I had spent my life teaching. I knew how learning actually works. Nothing improves unless it's challenged. Nothing stays sharp unless it's used. And nothing survives long if it's treated as expendable. So I made a quiet decision that afternoon. I would stop living as if decline were polite and unavoidable. I would live as if my brain were still expected to show up every day because I was still showing up. No panic, no fear, just a commitment to effort. And the very next morning I began. The first thing I changed wasn't my diet or my schedule. It was what I allowed my brain to do all day. For years, like most people, I had filled the quiet with easy noise. The television stayed on even when I wasn't watching. The radio murmured in the background. Articles were skimmed, not read. Thoughts floated by without ever being asked to finish themselves. It felt harmless. Comfortable, even. But comfort, I realized, is where thinking goes to sleep. So I took the easy things away. I turned off the television unless I was truly watching it. I stopped scrolling past words and started sitting with them. Every morning I gave my brain something that required effort before I gave it anything that felt good. I started doing difficult crossword puzzles, not the friendly ones, the ones that irritated me, the ones that made me stare at the ceiling and argue with myself. I did them in pen, not pencil, because commitment matters. I read books slowly, real books, not just the ones I agreed with, but the ones that challenged me, that forced me to ask why I believed what I believed. Sometimes I failed, often, actually, but that was the point. A brain that never struggles isn't staying young. It's being spared, and spared things don't grow stronger. I wasn't trying to prove I was smart. I was trying to prove I was still engaged, still capable of effort, still worth the work. By the end of that first month, something subtle had changed. My thoughts felt sharper, quicker, less fogged by inertia. Not because I was younger, but because I had stopped treating my brain like it was finished. The second change surprised me more than the first. I had always thought of loneliness as an emotional problem, something that made people sad, not something that made them forget. I was wrong. When you're alone too much, your brain stops having to work. There are no conversations to follow, no expressions to read, no pauses to interpret, no disagreements to navigate. Your thoughts go untested, your reactions go unused, and unused things weaken. I saw it in people I loved. They didn't just become quieter, they became slower, less certain, less present. So I made another decision. I would not let my brain spend its days in silence. I started small. A weekly card game with 3 women who were never afraid to tell me I was wrong. Short conversations at the market. Long ones with people who disagreed with me. I tutored a neighbor's child who was failing algebra. He didn't care how old I was. He cared whether I could explain it in a way that made sense. That forced me to think clearly, to organize my thoughts, not just have them. I argued with my grandson about politics, about history, about things that mattered to him and irritated me. He challenged me. I challenged him back. I didn't need to like everyone. I just needed to engage, because every conversation is a workout, and a brain that stops working out doesn't stay strong, no matter how many years it's lived. I never believed in extremes. I wasn't going to start running marathons at 90. I wasn't going to punish a body that had already carried me through a lifetime. But I also knew this: a body that stops moving teaches the brain to slow down with it. So I made movement ordinary. I walked every day, not far, not fast, around the block to the store, down the street and back again, enough to feel my heart wake up and my breath change slightly. I stood while I read, I moved while I thought. I did my chores myself for as long as I could, not because I had to, but because I could. There's something honest about movement. It sends a simple message to the brain: we are still participating. I didn't understand the science behind blood flow or oxygen or neurons firing more clearly. I didn't need to. I understood the results. The people I knew who sat still all day faded faster. Their bodies slowed and their minds followed. Movement didn't make me younger. It kept me present. 10 minutes, 15, a short walk, a small task. That was enough, because when the body keeps showing up, the brain tends to follow. This part isn't exciting. It doesn't make for bold headlines or dramatic promises, but it matters more than most people want to admit. Sleep came first. I went to bed at the same time every night. I woke up at the same time every morning. No, just this once. No staying up late to watch something I wouldn't remember anyway. My brain needed rhythm, something predictable to clean itself properly. I didn't know the science when I started. I only knew that on the days I slept well, my thoughts felt clearer, less cluttered, more patient. Later, I learned that the brain does its housekeeping at night. It clears out what builds up during the day, but only if you actually let it rest. Then there was food. I stopped eating things that came in packages pretending to be meals. I chose vegetables, fish, olive oil, simple foods that looked like what they were. I didn't give up everything I loved. I just stopped feeding my brain things that made it sluggish. Sugar made me foggy. Processed food left me tired in ways sleep couldn't fix. Your brain runs on what you give it. Feed it poorly and it works poorly. This wasn't discipline, it was respect. If I was asking my mind to stay sharp, the least I could do was stop making its job harder. This, more than anything else, is what saved me. After I retired, people assumed my life was over in all the ways that mattered. They didn't say it cruelly, they said it kindly. Now you can finally rest. You've earned it. Just enjoy what time you have left. As if rest were the goal, as if usefulness had an expiration date. I refused that story. When I stopped teaching in a classroom, I didn't stop teaching. I tutored students who needed help. I joined the library board. I volunteered where my experience still mattered. I needed my brain to know it was still required. When my husband died, people expected me to shrink, to quiet down, to wait. That's what widows are supposed to do, apparently. But I had places to be, people to correct, minds to challenge, including my own. Purpose doesn't have to be grand. It doesn't need applause or titles. It just needs to be real. A reason someone will notice if you don't show up, because when the brain senses it's no longer needed, it begins to shut down, politely, gradually, without making a fuss. I wasn't afraid of aging. I was afraid of becoming irrelevant. So every morning, I gave myself something that mattered, even if it only mattered to me, and my brain listened. I'm 101 years old. I don't say that to impress you. I say it because I've watched enough life to know the difference between luck and habit. The people who kept their minds didn't stumble into it, and the people who lost theirs didn't do anything wrong all at once. They made small choices every day for years, choices that told their brains whether they were still expected to work or quietly retire. This was never about beating age. Age always wins eventually. This was about showing up fully for as long as I could. I challenged my mind. I stayed connected to people. I moved my body. I slept. I ate in a way that respected the work my brain was doing, and I gave myself a reason to wake up every morning. None of that was complicated. None of it was fast, and none of it worked overnight. My students used to ask for shortcuts. There aren't any. There is only effort, repeated, unglamorous, and deeply effective. Your brain won't fail you suddenly. It fades when you stop asking anything of it. So don't wait for a diagnosis. Don't wait for forgetfulness to scare you into action. And don't let anyone tell you it's already too late. As long as you're still here, your mind is still listening. Give it something worth staying awake for.